Have you struggled to get great recorded acoustic sound? Today we go over the basics of recording acoustic guitar and our personal setups for great recordings. So stay tuned. Hello and welcome, friends, to episode 180 of the Play Guitar Podcast. I'm Lee, and this is the podcast that's determined to make you a better guitar player. No matter if you're just starting out or you've been playing for years, this is the show that will help you become the guitarist that you always wanted to be. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and check out the description for all of the links from the show. And remember, this episode is brought to you by Play Guitar Academy, where you learn the right skills at the right time in the right order to put guitar frustration in your past. Welcome. It's Acoustic Week. Scooter's here. Hey, Scott, how you doing?
All right, Lee. How are you this day?
I'm doing wonderful. We're going to be talking about recording today. We're going to get the dulcet tones of our acoustic guitars onto a medium of some sort to play back for other people. It sounds like an easy process. Not quite as easy as you would think. It's easy to just throw a mic in front of a guitar and be done with it, but there's some things that you might want to consider as you venture into recording. So how we're going to do this here is we're going to kind of go over the basics of recording acoustic guitars first. And then we're going to talk a little bit about our experience with having our guitars mic'd up. And we'll talk about that in just a second. And I've got a little setup here. I can't run stereo with the setup that we have, but I do have some of the different mics that we were going to talk about today. And hopefully, if everything works, we'll get some examples of what we're talking about here today. Scott, what's been your recorded acoustic guitar history? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the first time I recorded in the studio, it was probably I was very intimidated. I recorded at the same time the Allman Brothers were in Studio A or B or whatever it was at Criteria Studios in Miami, and I was recording a song I had written that was going to be sent out to LA to be listened to by somebody. I can't remember his name, but anyway, they did they recorded it live with mics. I didn't use a direct plug-in. And they used, I think, 2 mics, and they recorded in stereo. And I think they did a couple of takes. And at the same time, they had them the placement of the mics was very critical. It was something I wasn't really paying attention to at that time because I was I was freaked out. It was my first experience in the studio. Plus, it had to be Criteria, and you rely totally, at least I did, on someone knowing what the hell they're doing. So, but
you had a guy.
Two mics. I had a guy
who knew what he was doing. Right. That's right. That's what you do. Just forget everything we're going to say. Get a guy that knows what he's doing, and then or a girl, right, that knows recording acoustic guitars. I was fortunate enough to be able to mic up Scooter for a song that we did for his brother's TV show one time. And I was also very familiar with your live sound as well. So we did something a little different. We'll get into that in a little bit than just running a stereo thing. But the stereo thing can sound fantastic too. We'll talk about that in a minute. My experience. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, basically, I was just going to say that when I did start recording myself, and I had a little studio in Warner Robins, I think I used an Audio Technica. I did it mono. I really wasn't. I read what to do, the distance of the mic and the placement of the mic, and I then had the basics of it, and I had to move it around a bit to get that sweet spot to know exactly where it was, because every guitar is a little different, and the room has so much to do with it.
Yeah, well, that brings us right into our first section, which is the main things that you need to know for recording an acoustic guitar to get a good sound. In the first one, well, the room you're recording in and the guitar that you're playing. Those are the easiest ones, the ones that most people don't think about. They just grab the guitar and then they start doing all the stuff with the mics. And sometimes you may not have the right guitar for the job. So, and I encourage everyone, if they're getting into acoustic guitars, to listen back to episode 176. It was Acoustic Guitar Sizes and Shapes Explained. Scott and I had a lot of fun doing that. We went through all the different sizes and sounds of the different, what each guitar is going to give you. And there are definitely different sounding acoustic guitars for different purposes. So you could check that out. Where to record, that was the next one. That was what we're getting into. Scott, would you rather hear your guitar played in a dead sounding room, with padding all around it, or something with a lot of reflections?
Well, when I first started playing the guitar, I'd go into the bathroom, and it just sounded so good in there with echo and stuff. And I would think to myself, man, if I had a tape recorder in here, this would really be good. But I think my preference is when you've got all that reflection going on, it's hard to control it. At least it is for me. And, a room that's filled with like furniture and drapes. And of course, I didn't have a formal studio, but things that absorb a lot of the sound, I think is much better.
For me, it's right in the middle. Now, most people, when they are starting to get into recording, and vocals is the thing that you hear about a lot, and then they say go into your closet with all your tight spaces with your microphone, and it gets a very no room at all. An acoustic guitar in there is going to feel a little strange. At the same time, if you're in a big like basketball, court, or like a church hall or something like that, it'll sound neat in the room. You hear the reflections and it sounds really cool. But those can overpower, depending on how far away from the microphone that you are, overpower the main signal of your guitar, the main sound of your guitar. So I like to play, like if I was going to record, I have a setup right here, but in front of my computer. That's not where I would record my acoustic guitar. I would go out into maybe into the middle of the room or into the hallway outside. That's a little bit of life to it. That to me, that's where you're going to get a really nice, the guitar is going to sound like the guitar and not like muffled or, someone who's hit the cathedral patch on the reverb, thing. So where to record is, and that being said, it depends on the song. You might be looking for that bathroom tile sound. You might, that sound that gets into the mic may be what you're looking for. Being creative with where you record anything, much less, acoustic guitars, or that dead sound may be something that you're looking for. So this isn't if you're just looking for the typical standard acoustic guitar sound, a little bit of room, not super lively, not super dead, is going to help you out pretty good.
Right down the middle. And, it has to do also, like I think you were referring to the what kind of song you're doing. If I'm doing a solo kind of thing and I really want my guitar, the sound of my guitar, the warmth of it, and it's the only instrument we're working with, that might be a whole different thing than if I was playing with you and a bass player and a drummer.
Right.
What I want the sound to be on my acoustic then.
Right. So there's if it was just, if I was going to record Scott and if it was just his guitar on the track, I would do it completely differently. I would make sure that we have everything that we need. In fact, what we did if I'm not mistaken, is we did basically your guitar was the centerpiece. I did some lead stuff and maybe some dobro stuff, I think, here and there.
Wow.
And then we may have had some sort of tapping percussion. It wasn't like a big dense mix. So basically your guitar was the middle. So that's what we did. We'll talk about that in a minute. The next thing you're going to want to make a decision about is what type of microphones that you're going to use. There's basically two. That's there's other kinds as well, but the big two that most people choose from are condenser microphones and dynamic microphones. You also have ribbon and other things. So I'm not going to get into those. Just the two most common ones we're going to talk about today. Condenser microphones tend to have more of a high fidelity sound. You have extremely high highs and extremely low lows, and everything in between. They are generally run with phantom power from your recording interface or a mixer or something like that, meaning that they need something to work, and that comes through the cord into the microphone. Something you need to think about. Dynamic mics, like the vocal mics that you're used to seeing on stage, the SM57s and 58s, they have a little bit of a duller sound. They're primarily voiced for the voice. They have an upper mid-range boost, not tons of high end, and a little bit of roll off on the low end. That being said, condenser is usually what most people go for when they're recording acoustic guitars. But depends on the song and depends on what you're using it for. A SM57 or SM58 may be exactly what you need. You may need something that has a little bit more of a mid-range or like a woodier kind of sound, something different. So it depends on what you need. But 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a condenser microphone. Excuse me. And that is to get the sparkling highs from the acoustic guitar, which is where you hear most of that in a dense mix. That's what pops through if you've got tons and tons and tons of instrumentation. But there's also something called the pattern of the mic too is another thing that people cardioid is a front of the microphone direction. So basically in a cardioid pattern, a microphone will pick up what's in front of it and a little bit off to the sides. It will reject sound from behind. There's omni, there's figure 8, there's all sorts of different patterns that you can use. Omni is one. I remember, Scott, you had that. Do you remember that CAD mic that you let me borrow?
Yeah.
Yeah, that had omni on it, and I use that a good bit, which is completely, all the way around the microphone. It picks everything up. And sometimes that, when you're trying different things, I tried that one time. It sounded fantastic. I used it. So most of the condenser mics that we're going to talk about today are inexpensive. They're $99 is usually where they go. They look like they cost a lot more, but there's a lot of Chinese condenser microphones for now, and they're mostly cardioid. They pick up in front and reject the sound behind. Same with handheld vocal dynamic microphones as well. They have the same pattern. But if you're looking for something, fancier, you might want to look into some of the other pickup patterns, microphones that do different things as well.
I took the information and anything I've done in studio, and I loved that sound of a powered mic, and I started using them live, and I use a powered mic live as well. Yeah,
and you I think for a while you were using condenser vocal mics too.
That's what I mean. I use a condenser vocal.
Okay.
I go direct. I plug in direct on a live situation with the guitar, but on my vocals, there's that low end warmth, that high end bright, wonderful thing, and it really works for me live as well.
Okay, so that brings us to the next of the kind of the basics here is you need to know. So if you're going to go microphone, And we're going to talk about all the different things. We're going to talk about direct after a while too. Where to place the microphone is really, really, really important. The microphone's not smart. It's dumb. It does one thing. It picks up the way it picks up, and each microphone has a slightly different way it picks sound up. It's going to do that all of the time. It's not going to change. So what your job is to position your guitar and yourself and your microphone in a certain way that it picks up something that sounds natural from your instrument. And the first thing to think about with that is distance from the guitar. The closer your guitar is to a microphone, the more of the guitar you're going to hear. In fact, more of exactly where it's pointing on the guitar you're going to hear. The farther away from the microphone, you're going to hear more of the room. You're going to hear more of the echoes and, other things in the room, lawnmowers, kids playing outside that I can hear right now. So those things. So that's a choice for the song that you're playing. Is it an upfront guitar? Is it something strong, or is it something that sounds like a little bit of space, a little bit of room would add to the feel of the song? The second thing, as far as where to place the mic, is the direction that it's pointed. Is the microphone pointed at a certain place on the guitar, or maybe is it pointed across the guitar? Those are going to give you two different sounds. And where it's pointing at the guitar makes a big difference. All of this, a lot of people would think, well, we have such wonderful software now that we can EQ it and we can compress it and we can do all of these things to it after the fact. Getting the sound of your acoustic guitar right first can save you hours and hours and hours. It is so... Go ahead.
That's with everything in life. You can buy a piece of junk steak and add all you want to it. But unless you start with a good steak, you can't end up with a really great steak. And it's just that same way with sound. You got to start at the source and make it better or tailor it. But it can only be really good that way if you start at the source.
Right. It's good to shop a little bit for the steaks. And it's good, it's good to spend some time going back and forth. Today, before we went live, I did several test recordings to make sure that the setup that I have here was coming through, at least enough to be heard. Spending that time getting it right ahead of time is going to save. It's so much easier. There have been times when we've recorded acoustic guitar and it was just right. You didn't have to do really anything to it. It sat the way you wanted to. And that was from taking your time, So the next thing that's a basic of this is whether you're going to run stereo or mono. Most of the time you're going to hear mono. Here's two condenser microphones. This is a small diaphragm condenser, pencil microphone, they call them sometimes. And this is a large diaphragm. These are the traditional ones that people are used to seeing. The bigger microphones are large diaphragm microphones. They sound a little bit different. We're going to get into what the different sounds are from those. But generally, you'll have one microphone and you'll point in at the guitar in a certain way at a certain distance to get a mono sound, just the guitar on one track. What you will see sometimes is something called an XY setup. And a lot of us have seen this before, and that's where you'll see two of these. Generally, it's these pencil, small diaphragm microphones, and they're meeting at the front at a 90-degree angle. So one's shooting off this way, and one's going this way. And what that does is it takes a good representation of a stereo field directly in front of those two mics. And so where your guitar is in that stereo field, and generally those are set up and the guitarist moves around until it sounds correct. And what that does is something really, really neat. You would think, Well, the one microphone's pointing to the back of the guitar, and that's where you're going to get all bass. And the other one's pointing towards the strings, and that's going to be all treble. You would think, well, that would sound strange panned out. Generally, you don't hear them panned all the way out, wide. But a little bit of space like that can sound very, very nice. Very, very nice. So it takes a little bit extra time, and you have to worry about something that we're going to talk about now called phasing. What do you think about phasing?
It's not like hazing, but it's similar. And that's when, if you have a different distance from the guitar with one mic than the other, and you're recording in stereo, the time the sound gets to the mic, it causes a weird phasing thing.
Yeah, they call it comb filtering, I think, and it's where the waveforms are out of time. They're out of sync with each other. So when one waveform is going into the recorder, it may be slightly ahead or slightly behind of the other one, and they cancel each other out. So you get a really thin, odd sound with that. So the reason why in stereo on the XY, where they have both of the capsules right next to each other, that makes sure that you don't have the phasing. But when you do a mono guitar, there are some other things that you can do, and that would be to use two of these, just like a stereo thing, but use them more like an EQ, having one microphone pointing towards a part of the guitar that has a good high end, and then the other one pointing at another point of the guitar that gives you some of the low end of the guitar, some of that part. And that is a place, and that's very common. You've heard that a million times. But the problem with that is the phasing from that. And what a lot of people will do is, on a mixing board, you'll have that little phase symbol. So you punch the button and it knocks it, completely the other way. And sometimes that clears it up, sometimes it doesn't. But really, just moving the microphones a little bit farther apart can clear that right up. It takes a little bit of time. Once you get it, it's really nice. And so actually there was a really good article. It was soundonsound.com, techniques recording acoustic guitar. Really good. I'm going to put a link to this in the show notes. And they talk about different things. I don't even know if they would talk about this, but there's like a 3-to-1 ratio that you hear a lot, where the microphones are 3 times as far apart as they are as close to the guitar, and that usually makes sure that there's no phasing there. So that's one of the things to think about too. Then one of the biggest things that people are surprised about is how much bass is in a recorded guitar signal. So you spend all this time, you got the guitar, the performance, everything sounds good. Then you record it and you go back to listen to it, and there's a lot of low end to that. And kind of like the parlor guitars, right? You look at a parlor guitar, you wouldn't think there would be so much low end to it because of its size. There's a lot. And so one of the things that most of the time, I don't think there's ever been a time where I went to do a mix on an acoustic guitar where I didn't roll off some of the bass. There's some frequencies on an acoustic guitar that are not usable. They're so low that they get kind of woofy. You may not even hear them, but you might see, your speakers moving back and forth. Getting some of those little things. It's called a high pass filter. You put it on there, you set it where like 40 hertz or 50 or 60 hertz, wherever you want it. It knocks everything else below it. And a great way to do that is to just play the track and just slide it back and forth until it sounds the way you want it to sound. Doesn't sound any different, but it's knocking off all that stuff, that junk below that you don't want in your mix. So that's one of the things you do later. Compression is big for acoustic guitars. They're very dynamic instruments, and we all know that. You strum really hard, and you can just knock people out with them, and really they get super, super quiet. So in a mix, it's easy to lose those quiet parts, and so to control it, you'll use some compression most of the time on acoustic guitars to get them nice and even sounding. Okay, so Scott, do you have anything to add from the basics right here?
Well, it goes back to, if you get a good sound, whether you're using two mics or even one mic, engineers have the ability, when you get good at it, you'll mix one, you'll make a mix, and you'll get all the little things you want, and then maybe you want a different mix of that same guitar, and you'll copy it, and you'll pan them so that it almost is a stereo. It's really not, but it gets to be a wonderful thing as well, that you do after you start with something good. That's adding other good things to it. Right.
And a big thing that happens is doubling acoustic guitars. What a lot of people think, well, okay, I like my guitar. You'll hear that in songs where it's guitar far left and far right, leaving the middle for the vocals and drums and bass and all that stuff. And you'd think, okay, well, I want my guitar in the far left, far right. I'm just going to make a copy, right? So I'll just take that track that I just did, make a copy of it, put it on the other side. Basically, you just made it mono, right?
Right.
It just sounds big. You've lost that separation. They have to be slightly different for you to get that wide stereo effect. So when you double acoustic guitars, you have to start thinking about that. There's going to be a lot of information there playing. And basically what I'm thinking about is low end. You're going to really cut out some low end, because when you take a regularly recorded acoustic guitar and add another one to it, you're getting the high end, but you've got a massive amount of low end there. So you're going to do more EQ on a stacked acoustic guitar. And there's a skill to that too, being able to double apart, making it sound like it's the same thing, but not exactly the same. It's an art form. It's not as easy as you would think it would be. Okay, let's see here. What do we have left here? We have a few things left. We're going to talk a little bit about large diaphragm mics, small diaphragm mics, and then we're going to talk about going direct a little bit. So the large diaphragm mics, these are going to have your fullest sounds, lots of highs, lots of lows. This is the one that I would suggest, if you're getting into recording in the beginning, that you would pick up. It's the easiest to record an acoustic guitar. Basically, you're going to just pick where it sits along the guitar to get the best sound for you. You'll have all of the information. You'll have all the lows and the highs. And you'll also be getting a wonderful vocal mic as well. So one of these, $99, and you're in business. Some people put them on their amplifiers, miking an amplifier too. They're a little bright for me for that. But a lot of people get great results with those. They, like I said before, they require phantom powered. So you have to have some sort of an audio interface with a little phantom power to it, 48 volts. Let's talk about using one of these. Distance, the first thing we talked about. I like about from 1 to 2 feet from the guitar away. So actually I have one here. This with the gold top. It's a MXL. What is it? V67G, I think, for the green one, right? And I'm about maybe 1.5 feet away from that mic, and we'll hear that in a second. The farther away, the more room you're going to hear. The closer it's pointed to the sound hole. A lot of people think, well, I'm going to that's where the sound's coming out, Scott, right? Shouldn't I put a microphone right on the sound hole?
I wouldn't.
Okay. Why wouldn't you?
Well, when it's coming like a cannon right out of that sound hole, you're going to have to do a whole lot of work on the board to get rid of things that you shouldn't have to get rid of, I think, or add or whatever.
And you're also going to get, with the microphone plosive, what's the term? Maxing out the microphone. So you're going to get a lot of bad effects, overdriven effects in a microphone too. So we're going to stay kind of directly off to the side of that when we do this in just a minute. The next microphone we're talking about are the small diaphragm microphones. These excel at the high end. So if you're going to have a really dense mix where you've got a ton of instruments but you want that acoustic guitar, and basically you're hearing the high end of it over top of everything else. These are great for that. They have low end. They don't have as much. It's not as deep. It's not for low end. I would go for one of these. And say you have a boomy guitar. Say you have a guitar that has tons and tons and tons of low end. You might want to go for one of these too. Right. And then you can get your 2-mic mono blend, like we were talking about before, or an XY stereo. You can use it one mic, just like we're going to do with the large diaphragm condenser. You can position it anywhere you want, angle it anywhere you want, and you have to deal with distance and angle right there. The 2-mic mono blend, best of the highs and lows. We're going to see that in a second. And then a 2-mic XY stereo, 90 degrees, and positions your guitar in a stereo field. And the last of the basics that we're going to talk about before we do a little demonstration is recording direct. Okay, so Scott, you said you perform live going direct all of the time.
Right. And in the studio, in my own little studio, when I'm recording, I'll generally just go direct and get the sound I want for a demo reason. It's something I'm not going to be publishing and putting out there for sale.
Right.
But I've used both. I've used a large diaphragm and gone direct and got two different signals and been able to blend them very well. Just experimenting. I think that's part of learning how to engineer. I prefer not to. I'd rather just go straight to Lee's house and say, "Hey, Lee, record this."
And what we did, we had a pretty big room there that house I was living in. I'm pretty sure we used these 2 small diaphragms mics, and then we also ran direct as well.
Right.
So we ran his regular live sound into the board, and then I think I used that as the first part, and then blended in the microphones to make it sound natural, to give it some air and some room and those things.
We watched the film that we were putting the music to, and it wasn't just this lilty little acoustic guitar thing. It was this airboat coming at you and then turning to the side and going through the swamp. So we wanted that slide guitar that you were putting in, little woody sound from my guitar, and then some of the direct sound from my guitar as well.
And so, in doing that process is something that's being used a lot, but electronically now. So there's a lot of people blending their direct guitar sound with impulses. Impulses are small recordings of like the EQ of a room or the EQ of a guitar or inside of a guitar. The Fishman, I use the Fishman, the Aura box. I use it the same way that we did for recording. I use it very sparingly. I've heard people who've used that where they put tons of these recorded impulses in, and it doesn't even sound like the same guitar that they're playing. But you can get really great results just blending a little bit in there. It gives it a little bit of life. And with those, they have different guitars that they've sampled. You can pick different guitars. And so what most people will do is if I'm playing a Dreadnought, I'm going to go pick a Dreadnought, and that's going to match, and it's going to make it sound more like a mic'd guitar. Playing that on a gig for 7 months, I never used the guitar I was supposed to. I always I just went through them till it sounded correct, and I found a really nice blend where it matched my guitar really well. So that's another thing. And I may do a video just on that box, how to get good sound out of that. Cause it's not used really well a lot. So I think that may be something we'll do. But you can also do that in your DAW too, in your recording interface too. They have impulse generators where you can blend in a little bit of acoustic guitar sound to a direct that works as well. Okay, so there's all the basics. That's what you're in for. I would say an interface and a $99 large diaphragm condenser, and you're rocking, right? If you wanted to go farther, you could get some different microphones, some small diaphragm microphones. If you wanted, you could get different preamps, and then you can spend $1 million after that. But let's go ahead. Let's do some. Let's listen a little bit to. What should we do first? Let's do the large diaphragm condenser first. And what I'm going to do is I am going to play a little bit, just some open chords, and I'm going to move the guitar around. So at one point, it will be facing about 1.5 feet away, right towards probably the 17th fret on the guitar. And then as I'm playing, I'll go and I will make sure it goes over the sound hole so you can hear what that sounds like. And then I'll start playing where it's pointing behind the bridge towards the wood on the guitar. Okay. So I'm going to mute my microphone so we don't have that messing things up here. And I'll start up. Okay, here we go. Here's over the sound hole. Okay, so where I started was up high. I was just played an E chord and played a little bit. As I got over the sound hole, you could hear it fill out a whole lot. I was playing lightly. I wasn't slamming it. If I was slamming it at that point, you'd hear it kind of mess with the microphone. Went back over here. You could hear the mid-range kind of, it was MIDI, more MIDI than bassy to me from what I heard. But then I did something what I like to do when I record it. When I went back up to the 17th fret I angled here. So even though it was directly in front of the 17th fret, the microphone was pointed towards the bridge. So I'm getting a lot of high-end and low-end frequencies all in one place. That's usually where I find I get the best sound. What did it sound like on your end, Scott?
Yeah, I could hear the difference as you moved. Later, if we ever do this again, we'll put you in a chair that has wheels, and then I can grab you like this and pull you and push you back and forth. And it's a little easier than moving like that. But you can definitely tell as you move through the range, you could hear the difference.
Hoverboard, or just roller skates. We could do roller skates.
Roller skates would work well.
Okay, so that's the large diaphragm condenser. This is not a super bright one. This is a it's a little bit of a warmer sound for condensers, but it still does the same thing. This time I'm going to use, let's see, I'll show you on a full screen here. I've got 2 small diaphragm condensers here. So I'm going to use the one that's closest to my fretboard and strings. That's going to give us a little bit of high end. Okay. Okay, so you should hear a little bit of a difference, but from even when I had the large diaphragm condenser, you're going to have more detail in the high end. It's gonna feature more of the upper mids as well. Now I'm going to do the same style of microphone, but it's going to be pointed more right there. So now I'm going to blend the two. So I'm going to put the both of the small diaphragm condensers on. It's going to be louder. We're going to have twice as much information coming in. So I'm going to back up just a little bit so I don't so those together don't distort. But let's see what this sounds like. Okay, what did that sound like to you, Scott? Let me bring Scott
Well,
back here.
obviously, there's a difference, and I liked it better with the blend, certainly for my ears. And then, of course, everybody that's listening in here, I happen to be using my telephone today, and I'm limited to what these speakers hear. But I'm sure you're hearing much more of a difference with your studio monitors where you are.
Yeah, so it's it was it's just a different sound. Both are usable in a mix. I could have used even just this one mic if I had angled it a little bit like I did with the large diaphragm condenser. That would have been usable as well. Each one of them, they're spaced correctly. I did back up a little bit on the last time, and that may have affected the way you may be hearing more of the room. There's a lot of stuff in this room. It's not a really echoey room. But there you go. That's a demonstration of how I would mic an acoustic guitar to that I would have something that I could really work with in a mix a little bit later on. Okay, any final thoughts, Scott?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say certainly, experiment. That's the whole fun of it. And finding that spot that really makes you smile is what all of this is all about.
Right. And this is a good starting point. You can go anywhere from here. Like I said, there's ribbon microphones. You could try those. Those have a whole different sound to them as well. Can sound fantastic. But yeah, just this is commonly what's done in recording, and then you can take it and make it your own. And whatever your ears tell you is good, that's good. Okay? Okay, well, thank you, Scott, for hanging out with me again today. This was wonderful.
My pleasure.
This was a lot of fun.
My pleasure. It's always fun. It's always my pleasure.
All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead. If you're struggling with playing chords and you don't want any extra unwanted buzzes or rattles or those things, I have a free gift for you. Head over to playguitaracademy.com/clear chords. That's also in the show notes, and pick up my guide to clear sounding chords. I go over all the adjustments in this guide, and it's going to get you playing chords that impress every time. And we're going to call it That's a Wrap. Thanks for joining me today for the Play Guitar Podcast. Make sure to hit the button below to subscribe to the show. And if you're watching on YouTube, hit the notification bell so you can get all of my content as soon as it comes out. And are you ready to fill in the cracks and use my roadmap to get your playing moving forward again? If so, I'm ready to help. Head on over to playguitaracademy.com. Thanks again, and I will see you on the next episode.
Happy recording.
Yeah, but, we're still here for a few minutes. We're going to hang out in the chat. We have a lot of chat going on here. Let's see here. Let's go back. Oh, Dean's here. Hey, Dean. Jim is here all the way from Australia. What's happening, man? What's up? Evan's here. Let's see here. Michael was here. Great to see you, Michael. Rick was here. Coke is here. Dwayne is here. Matt was here. God, we had the whole group today. That's awesome. And Evan said, sometimes you want the percussive sound. I think he was talking about that when we were talking about dynamic microphones. I think. Let's see here. Coke said, biggest learning experience I have with the mic acoustic was stop punching the microphone. Yeah, that would be unless that's what you were going for, Yeah, let's see. Oh yeah, many times. Let's see here. Evan was talking about when we are recording acoustic, it's surprising how much bass can be on there when you start to mix. Let's see here. And he said copying is not effective doubling at all. Yeah, it doesn't work. So, and what some people will do is they will take a waveform, a mono waveform, and like I said, copy it and then split it hard left and hard right. At that point, it's mono. But what they'll do is they'll physically move it in time back a little bit. They'll slide it out of where it should be. And the amount of time you do that will give you some stereo separation. But it doesn't, it sounds like you did that. You know what I mean? It doesn't have that natural double guitar sound. It's really, really important to learn how to double track really well in recording. Let's see here. I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. And we're talking about, Coke says, recording is too expensive of a hobby. And Evan said, it's not cheap, but you can really do a lot with just $50 for an interface and $20 for a mic, more for a condenser. It's gotten a lot more affordable. When I started getting into recording, it was expensive. I could get results now. You could spend $200 and be in the game. You know what I mean?
When I started recording, it was like ADATs and stuff like that. There weren't computers that were doing it. Yeah. And, our computers were playing Donkey Kong and stuff. But it's gotten a lot easier today and affordable.
Well, computers here are still playing Donkey Kong, I think. But
yeah.
Evan says, but yeah, there's a cost barrier to entry for sure. Let's see. I'm going to scroll down a little bit more. And it's Coke and Evan were talking to each other about recording. And then let's see. Evan said, thanks, Scooter. Michael said, thanks, great info. And Evan says, I've done the time shifting too, but it's not the same at all. And on vocals either. That's correct. Okay, well, I hope you guys had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun bringing this to you. Taking some of, some of the things that we've learned by trial and error and hard knocks, those things, and bringing them to you. That's right. And saving y'all a little bit of time and headache there. I hope you learned something. And thanks for hanging out with us today. It was great to have Scooter back. I look forward to the second Tuesday of every month. I get to hang out with my buddy Scooter. So it was a lot of fun. All right, everybody. We will see you next time. Okay? Have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.